Okay, I think today is the day we try it. Hopefully this will work out okay and not go up in flames.
So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at how to use the polyformer to turn plastic bottles into filament PET that you can use to print something. At the end of this video, we will also be printing something using recycled PET. Right now, we are picking it up right after we finished assembly of the polyformer. Naturally, the first thing to do is to make sure all the settings are correct. I would highly recommend checking the Discord, as the settings and the correct settings are always changing depending on which version of the polyformer you're using.
Start shows the temperature, not going to change too much. Feed shows the feed rate, corrected from the default value of 5 to 3 due to bug in that, okay? So it's with 3 on the R value there. Alright, let's see if this still works. Yes, it does!
To change the settings, it is very simple. Simply follow the guide and input the correct numbers using the LED screen interface.
Okay, let's give that a go.
And now we are on our first bottle for extrusion. The bottle has already been pre-cut and put into the ribbon cartridge. After the bottle is in the ribbon cartridge, all you have to do is make sure the initial PET that's going to be fed into the extruder is thin enough to slip through the nozzle.
A little bit more. Temperature is at 220.
If you want to see how we cut a bottle and feed into the ribbon cartridge, you can refer to the previous video or scroll ahead on this one. If you want to see how to feed the initial PET in through the nozzle and use pliers to pull the initial bit out, you can also scroll ahead on this video.
That means this is going to go on like this. Shouldn't this be rotating the other way?
And now we encounter our first problem. Luckily, this one is very easily fixable. There is an option in the settings that says reverse false. Simply click on it and you reverse the direction of the motor.
There you go. There's a setting to make it go reverse.
Now you encounter our second problem, and it's a rather large one. It's the gearbox not being strong enough. This was a very difficult thing to try to troubleshoot, but luckily I'm going to skip through all of this because all of these problems are now legacy problems ever since the Sun Planet Gear update. In summary, I spent a lot of time here and it cost me quite a lot of mental energy, but you don't have to worry about this ever due to the new update that is out. There is an update. We were having troubles with the gearbox. It wasn't quite pulling the filament well enough, and then when I went online they said that they came out with a new gearbox 2 weeks ago. I printed the original gearbox a month ago, so this is a very recent update, and hopefully this will fix the troubles we're having right now with it. Slice it on Prusa slicer.
This is now outdated. New gearbox is supposed to be much more lenient in terms of the force it's supposed to give power. The old ones was just not pulling well enough.
So once again, the biggest advice for building the polyformer or working the polyformer is to always check on Discord, because I can now speak from experience that there's a lot of headache you can usually avoid just by making sure you have the most up-to-date version. With the new gearbox completely installed, I decided to try to protrude my second water bottle of the project.
Alright. This is a pretty big bottle. And plug in. Now that it's plugged in, let's click start. Okay, let's check out the new gearbox.
So as I mentioned, the new Sun Planet gearbox eliminated a lot of the issues with the motors, but it is still in itself not perfect.
It's not moving very fast, is it? It does feel stronger.
Being optimistic, I hope that it could still work, so I decided to try protruding. I will later find out that the new Planet Sun gearbox had a loose gear in it.
To plug this in. Let's see if this will pull.
Although better than its predecessor, the new Planet gearbox was still quite weak at this stage.
It is straight now, so it is now running on motor power.
Later you'll come to see that this problem is very intertwined with problem number 3.
Is it actually pulling anything through? Kind of. I mean, so far so good. So that's looking pretty okay. Here's everything in the back. And that is the filament coming out.
Before we get to the loose gear issue, there is one problem here that was fairly quickly presented and very easily fixed, and that is the rattling noise.
Update, turns out these things were in too tight, that's why we were getting that kind of angry sound, but Now that I've loosened them a little bit, it's kind of going a little bit better. Well, just like the previous design, it is now completely stopped. Right, so to stop this, I'm simply gonna just cut that.
At this point in the video, I would come to realize the loose gear is the main cause of all of these issues.
It's definitely spinning, but it sometimes skips. And sometimes it does this. This is what happened. Okay, I think I see the problem now. This is the problem. You see that? That's moving, and if I press on here, I can hold it still. So this gear doesn't stay in place. There is a hole here.
I think the intention was that you would put a screw through that hole and that would lock the motor's rotor in place. I did not put a screw through this.
But in my defense, there is no schematic for this at the moment. There's just an online file that says things where they're supposed to be, but literally nothing else.
The online files mentioned nothing about screws.
This one is 8mm one.
A screw through the hole by itself did not hold the gear in place, so I figured I would try to do a little bit of DIY here.
Okay, so it's come to this. So what I currently did is I took a drill and I made this bigger. And now hopefully I can put this heat insert right here. If that goes well, we'd have fixed the problem. Alright, so just to recap, what we did was we used this drill bit to make that hole in the middle a lot bigger, so a threaded insert or heat insert could fit into it. The drill size that was used to make the initial hole was that one. And then after making it bigger, we took our soldering iron and took one of our extra heat inserts and plugged it in, and now a screw can go in there, and this one is definitely not coming loose or moving, so this is tight. Alright, let's see if this is going to be a horrible idea or not.
I said that mainly because Discord had not tried this yet, and because of how new the update was, Ryton wasn't sure if that was going to work.
Try to see if we can use a smaller screw from this. I guess we can just carve it a little bit better in place so it kind of fits better. Let's see if we can just push it off a little bit, make it go more, just because the heat insert is more further in, so. Alright, update. I shaped it enough, and now if you look directly here, kind of tell it goes in a little bit. The other thing is, we need this part to be out of the range of the planet gears, because otherwise it doesn't get in the way.
If the head of the screw was too outwards, it would actually disrupt the planet gears from rotating.
Hopefully that fixes everything. Would be good. And if I apply a little bit force, does it stop? No, it doesn't. It's really pushing me now. Alright, let's give it a go.
The person who made the Planet Sun gear design saw the way that I did this and actually decided to fix the design up a little bit. I never saw the new design because, as you'll see, this heat inserted center gear holds everything perfectly in place.
And then let's do this. Alright, so we are officially trying to turn everything and seeing if it's going to go with the planet gear adjustment. It's about to be pulled. We're about to switch over to rotational gear power, so I'm going to slide the arm in place. And now it is at the mercy of the gearbox. Let's see if it'll work. Okay, let me come back in a few minutes and see if this time we will actually make it through the end. I think the sound is coming from the motor. And although it is working, I'm not sure if this is good for the longevity of the engine. Sounds still quite violent, but it is still going, and it's been, well, over 20 minutes at this point. That is almost one water bottle completely done then. Made it to the end. I wonder wanted to see if we can just maybe lube up the area to decrease the noise, and then we'll print one more.
This is pretty self-explanatory. The gears were having too much friction. If you can see it, but there is tons of just,
it looks like PLA scraps. It looks like it's really rough. Okay, let's see if maybe a little bit of lube helps it along. How should I do this?
I just used some of the machining oil left over from the Prusa service.
We're gonna start.
As you see, most of the engine's problems are completely fixed at this point, and we will go through our first complete protrusion with no noise with this green bottle.
Alright, trial number 2. And it keeps on going. Let's see if this miraculously makes it all the way through one water bottle. We are near the end. We almost went through an entire bottle. And this is the first successful full protrusion we've done, so that's good. And this has not made any noises from like the first one that we did. And the last bit is in. Alright. Okay, it's not quite perfect. It's like almost a full circle. Most of this is full circle. I'm not sure if this is good enough for 3D printing with. My main concern known is actually the fact that this is kind of still a semi-crescent moon.
A semi-crescent moon means the ribbon diameter that you initially inputted was slightly too thin. Since the motor box is working now, I decided to just print a second one with a wider ribbon.
This is kind of the product there.
I skipped a few steps there, but basically I tried it with a much wider ribbon and it did not work that well still. The problem with the semicircle was I was afraid the feeder or the little gears that hold the filament on the Prusa would not be able to attach themselves to a semicircle versus a full circle. Nonetheless, because of how consistent the filament looked, I kind of figured I would try to print with it right then.
Alright, is it horrible idea day? It might be. I'm gonna clean this and we're gonna try to print something very simple using the recycled filament from one of the water bottles today. Let's just heat this up and see if this can actually go through. Alright, we are heated. Let's see if this will go through.
Spoiler alert, it did not. Luckily though, nothing jammed the nozzle.
That's not good. So the problem is it isn't being melted. In the very beginning, it kind of went down a little bit, but then I had to give it a bit of push because I think based on how thick this is, it might actually not be good enough to be held on. And the Prusa is meant to hold on to 1.7.
I will find this out later. 1.6 millimeters works just fine.
See, the main issue is it's not really expanding. It's kind of just staying to where it is. Like for all of the PLA that I have on there, those are all very consistently 1.7.
So we've cleared that the thickness of the filament is not the problem. The problem, as it turns out, is actually because of two reasons. The first one is temperature, and the second one is nozzle cleanliness. At this stage, however, I did not think about those two factors yet. So using some tips from Discord, I decided to do a wider cut of the ribbon to try to increase the thickness of the filament.
I was looking through old footage the other day, and I realized that when we were printing the carabiner, we actually weren't doing the settings that I actually got.
Just to clarify, while I was doing the wider cut, I had realized that I was only printing at 230 degrees, which is the Prusa's recommended heat for PET. After realizing this, I stopped the new cut and decided to just print the old one at 260. But it still did not work, and that's because of reason number 2, which is a dirty nozzle.
If that's actually plastic or not. The tip here is actually the exact shape of the nozzle, which means it's definitely making it to the edge. It's just not making it the extra step.
We had fixed the temperature issue and I've adjusted everything accordingly to 260 degrees. And the only possible explanation for not protruding, according to me at this stage of the video, was that the filament itself was still not 1.75 but 1.60. Knowing this and thinking that was the case, I decided to continue with the wider cut of the ribbon in hopes that when we protrude it, it's going to be a much more fuller filament, and being fuller, it might expand to 1.75. I will later find out that this was not really necessary, but this was the next step that we tried.
It feels like it should work.
During this protrusion, I came up with an upgrade to switch from plier power to automatic power as soon as possible.
This piece on the spool is meant to hold on to the initial bits of plastic
as it comes out of the extruder there. I did a quick mini adjustment to this because originally the plastic will actually go through this nozzle here, come out on the other side. You have to use pliers to pull and manually extrude it all the way from here down to here, and then across the back, and then all the way here, all manually, until we can force it to be on this piece. And then this piece was pulled by the molder here. And what I did was I attached a piece of ribbon to this part that and attached to the spool. And I made it connect to this piece with like this. And what that does is now when the first manual protrusion comes from here, this is just long enough to catch it. Straight from the get-go, as soon as it gets pulled through, a little bit can be attached already and go on automatic molder powers. Now moving on, back to the wider cut. This part is hollow. I've plugged in what we just extruded into there, and now I'm gonna see if I could get anything to come out of the extruder. Before I tried to extruding this time, my anxiety got the better of me, and I figured I would check that the nozzle actually lets anything through. As I mentioned previously, one of the other issues why it wasn't extruding was because the nozzle is incredibly dirty and it had to be replaced. And at this point I realized that there was quite a lot of resistance, and that's what hinted me towards the fact that I needed to change a nozzle. So we're gonna turn this towards us, like so. And this one goes in here. If you ever seen any of my videos, this nozzle has been there since the very beginning, has never been changed. What the heck? That looks solid. And kind of gross. I think you're supposed to switch nozzles when you're switching materials, because I went from PLA to PET. Turns out the nozzles are really cheap. This was around 20 bucks and it came as a pack of 20. We're gonna plug this in and then see if maybe that's the problem why we couldn't get anything like that filament to actually go through. This is 0.7 millimeters, and we're gonna put the new nozzle in here. And now let's just screw this on. And that is the new nozzle in. I think the smartest thing to do after getting the nozzle in there is probably to do a recalibration. Okay, so we are at the stage where it says select nozzle preheat temperature which matches your material. So I guess this is the first test we're gonna do. And now it's preheating the nozzle, and we're gonna feed it our recycled PET. I wouldn't realize, but this is 230, and as I mentioned previously, we need this to be 260 for recycled PET. I'm gonna turn that off because that's not gonna fly. Resume the calibration later. Let's see what's going on. This is a familiar sight. It's just because we didn't use 260 degrees. It's just not making it all the way through. Okay, so I asked this coordinator and they said that you should probably print on 260 to 270 degrees Celsius. There's a few different problems I have to work with at the moment. Number one is I switched the nozzle and need to recalibrate everything on the Prusa. To recalibrate it, we actually need to print a little bit or have a little bit of material come out. I only had PLA on me and I didn't want to extrude PLA to actually get the calibration right, then have to replace the material into PET. So what I decided to do was I got filament in PET. This is not recycled filament PET, of course. This is just regular PET filament. And I'm going to calibrate the Prusa with the PET filament. Let it go through the new nozzle that we recently put in. After it's completely calibrated, we'll try to print with recycled PETG at 260 to 270 degrees. Alright, so we have started the calibration process. So we're at the calibration point right now where we have to choose the type of material, and we're going to choose PET this time. That's the one we want to print with eventually. Here's PET so we can actually calibrate the machine and have the nozzle ready for PET. My concern right now is if it's actually going to come out, because we did switch a nozzle. Oh, and it's coming out! Look at that. Yes, it is with the right color. Now we'll calibrate the distance and all of that. So this is going to be the last time we're going to touch the Amazon shipped PET, because we're going to be using recycled PET from here on in. I'm going to bring this setting to ASA because that brings the nozzle at around 260 degrees. And then let me just move the axis to the middle. It is time to try the recycled PET. So this is the recycled PET, and we know the nozzle currently works for PET as well. So recycled PET, as you can tell, it's coming from the middle section there. And so this is the recycled PET. And you can kind of tell there's a bit of a cup there as well. So we're gonna let this go through and see if anything comes out at the other end. You know, something's coming out, but something tells me that this is just the PET that we had previously. So I'm gonna see if I can push it a little bit more and see if we can get started using the PET from the water bottle. At this point, we are now extruding the proper recycled PET. It is very easy to distinguish which PET came from the store and which PET was from a recycled water bottle. The ones that are recycled have tons of bubbles and impurities. I think it's actually printing it. This might be printing it. Okay, let's do this. Let's see if this is good or not. So this is what came out of there. At the very beginning here, this was the store-bought PET. It looks like this. It's quite clear, it's quite consistent. And then this is actually from the water bottle. There's tons of bubbles everywhere. Is that good news or bad news? Bad news is I don't think this is gonna print perfectly well, but the good news is this is definitely not the PET that we bought. So I think it's actually printing from PET that we got from the water bottle. So this confirms kind of two things. The first thing is that we could print with PET, and the second thing is, even if this is kind of a hollow tube, it's still printing. I think what we're gonna do is, I'm gonna adjust the thing that I actually wanted to print, which is a carabiner. So if you can print with recycled PET, that would have been the end of our project here, because that means we've done it. I've put in the STL file into a Prusa slicer. I changed the settings around to 260 for the nozzle, and still 85 degrees for the bed. And hopefully this is gonna work much better now. Hard to see there, but there is string. We have the recycled PET right here, being fed through there, and going through here. And now we just gotta hope that nothing completely screwed this up. Okay, so I'm noticing a problem, and I think it's that the extruder is actually not letting a lot of filament through at all. You can tell exactly what was going wrong here, and that's that the temperature is currently set at 240, when the printing temperature is meant for 260. Before it crashed, it actually let through some of this, and that looks like pretty decent base layer. As you can see, I did not realize the temperature was 240, and I wouldn't realize that until way later in this video. Thinking this was still just because the filament wasn't quite full enough, I decided to cup up another water bottle and use even wider ribbons. Although the wider ribbons does not really play an essential role for the filament to be fed through, it does improve the quality of the print. So I guess although not a major point of concern, a slightly thicker and much more fuller filament does print with better quality. And temperature we are going to go for is all set. We're going to start to get this thing into place. It's just the initial bit has to be absolutely super thin. Bring this over, make it go under, attach this to that side. Maybe we needed that. There we go. Okay, temperature is 230 and steady. We are getting protrusion through, and I think we're good. So it is still currently going and doing quite well, actually. This probably is towards the end of our journey here. I see it's kind of towards the end of our journey here because the goal here has always been to just print with recycled PET, and I think we're going to achieve it with this extrusion. Here I'd like to share with you all the different failed things we've done using the Polyformer before we got to something usable. This was from Mountain Dew, which was pretty good. This is from, I forgot what bottle, but it actually turned out pretty okay. This was one of the first ones we have ever done, and as you can tell, it's absolute garbage. This is from another very thin water bottle, and this has the same issue as the most recent one that we tried printing with, in that it just has too much air bubbles and too much gaps in the actual print. I sanded this one. That's why it looks very, very opaque. I wouldn't really trust this to go into my Prusa there. I don't think this is a good idea. This one is very rough around the edges, and I'm pretty sure this one, yeah, it's not even a full moon. Because this was the time when the extruder motor was so bad, I figured I'd give it less work to do by giving it much more thinner ribbons than it was supposed to. I think this was meant to be a 10mm ribbon. I think we used a 5. Polyformer is actually a pretty difficult project all considered. This is not going to be fit through because it's half a moon. It's not thick enough. This one wasn't bad, but once again, it's still kind of a semi-moon. So this was the first water bottle I think we fully went through, but I think I might have manually helped it go through that time. And this was from the most recent one. It's got that problem with the half moon thing going on again. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Out of the first 10 tries we did, 7 of them were failures and 3 of them are currently maybes. Regardless, from an amateur's perspective, the Polyformer does require quite a lot of self-directed learning. The troubleshooting part requires a lot of patience and a lot of fine-tuning. And like I said, after the 10th extrusion report that kind of failed and needed readjustments towards the gearbox, I just lost motivation to do it really. It was just not very enticing to keep trying. Hopefully it works, or otherwise this is kind of just jumping the gun. I don't feel like there's that much more troubleshooting left to do, but maybe this video will come out to be like 40 minutes and turns out this is just the beginning, but we'll see. So 3 successful attempts, about 7 failures in there. Alright, so just a quick update on here. That actually looks pretty good. These aren't even semi-moons. They're not half moons. They are full thickness filament. I heard a snap, then I came here and I thought something had broken, but we're actually done. I'll take this part off. Take that part off as well. Unscrew that, pull that out. And now we have our filament. All of this looks really good except for the end here, and the end here looks something like this. So this is the reason why some of the other ones we've thrown away, we had to throw away, because if it always looked like this and it was a semicircle, this is not wide enough to be really fed through the 3D printer or extruder. So let's cut it here. Still kind of looks like a tube, but definitely a much better tube than what we had previously. Alright, so let's give that a go. We're going to preheat this, and I'm going to bring this to ASA, even though we're not printing with ASA. ASA has a preheating section of 260 degrees, which we want this to be at. Okay, let's feed this through. There we go. Alright. Now, a little bubbly like the last one, but not horrible. Still got that dotted pattern of a little bit of blanks there, but you know what? It actually looks much better than the other one we did. This might actually work. Yeah, that looks like proper printing filament. Okay, this print requires 31 minutes. Hopefully I have enough filament at this point. Okay, so I found out an issue with this one. If you look right now, you'll see that the temperature was actually at 240. Now, the reason the temperature is at 240 is because I set the initial temperature to be 262, but I made it only 260 for the initial layers. So this isn't a filament issue, this is a me issue. But if you look, everything looks pretty good still. So let me change up some of these settings over here, and then we'll come back to this. Alright, this time I did make sure that everything was staying at 262. Hopefully this is the last we're going to deal with this. Contrary to what I've been showing here, I actually really don't like failing. We are 15 minutes away at this point, and it is still going strong. We are officially really close to running out of filament, but we are also 3 minutes away from finishing printing, and I think we're going to be good. So what I'll do is I'm just going to set this up and let the last 3 minutes play out.
If you made it this far into the video, well, congratulations, you are here for the very first successful rPET print.
And we are 0 minutes from finishing, so we are almost completely done at this point. And now we are done. The complete carabiner printed with completely recycled PET from a water bottle. Okay, well, first of all, we are almost out, so...
I really wanted to unload the filament as soon as possible, just because I'm not sure how much I trust the PET that's recycled to cool down in my nozzle. I was afraid it might cause some issues.
So yeah, mission accomplished. We're done. Let me do a summary for this because that is gonna have to cool down. Now that we finished this product, I guess there's a few things we can write down here as tips. The first and biggest tip is try to find a water bottle that is 0.2 millimeters or 0.3 millimeters. At 0.1 millimeters, the ribbon has to be 20 and it's not great. It doesn't quite go into the extruder very well. Tip number 2 is the filament that comes out, the recycled filament, it could be 1.6 millimeters and still print okay. It doesn't have to be 0.75, despite the fact that Prusa says the filament should be 1.75 millimeters. Tip number 3, when you're printing with the recycled rPET, use temperatures of 260 or above for every single layer, not just the initial layer, every single layer. Print at 260, because that's the only temperature at which they're gonna actually melt. Tip number 4 is kind of a tip just for myself. A lot of the PET that you're gonna be printing with, if it's recycled, it's not quite pure and they're gonna leave little traces behind. Try to use a new nozzle if you can, that's all I can say about it, just because if you have a really good nozzle, you might ruin it. There were some times during this project but I was kind of a little bit overwhelmed because being an amateur 3D printing enthusiast, I had tons of things I had to learn. Yeah, it's been quite a project, but now that it's over, I'm pretty happy with the result. And as the finale, let's see how this fares. So pretty good overall. This is definitely PET. A lot of stringing, as you can tell. And now it removes itself just like any other print I've made. And ta-da! It works! This turned into this. And I think that's kind of neat.